The jamming hit without warning. At 30,000 feet over the Ash Creek Range, Lieutenant Dean Bishop Callahan watched his radar screen dissolve into static. 1 second, he had a clean lock on his wingman's transponder. The next, nothing, no data link, no GPS, no radio chatter except a hiss like sand pouring through a speaker. Vapor 1, radar's gone, he called. Silence answered him. Vapor 2, do you copy? Ghost 2, anybody? His F-22 rolled 30 degrees before he caught it, adrenaline spiking through his gloves. Below the canopy, the desert floor tilted at an angle that made his stomach drop. Somewhere out there, less than 2 miles off his left wing, another jet was flying blind in the same dead airspace, and neither pilot could see the other. Then, cutting through the static like a blade, a voice came over guard frequency. Calm, unhurried, almost bored. Vapor 1, this is Specter. Cut your throttle to 60%, nose down 2 degrees, and stop fighting the stick. I have you visually. You're not going to die today. Bishop froze. He didn't know that call sign. Nobody at Grey Wolf did, not officially. If you've ever needed someone steady to reach you in the exact moment you thought you were alone, you already understand why this story matters. Subscribe now, because what happens between that radio call and the runway is the kind of thing that gets whispered about at Air Force bases for years afterward. Stay until the end. You'll want to know exactly who Specter was and why it took a jamming attack at 30,000 feet to finally reveal her. 9 years earlier, the name Major Elena Kirkwood had meant something in rooms most people never got clearance to enter. She'd flown 214 combat sorties in the F-22 Raptor, 2 of them during a classified electronic warfare operation over contested airspace that never appeared in any public record. Her call sign, Specter, had been retired along with her uniform. Not because she'd failed, but because what she'd done was too sensitive to say out loud. The Air Force gave her an honorable discharge, a folder marked "Need to Know," and a quiet civilian life she never asked for. At 47, Elena worked as a contract systems verification pilot for Silvaline Aerospace, flying refurbished Raptors through diagnostic checks before they returned to active squadrons. To the young officers at Grey Wolf Air Force Base in eastern Nevada, she was just the contractor, a woman in a plain flight suit who ran instrument checks and stayed out of the way. Lieutenant Bishop Callahan, 26 and 2 years into flying Raptors, had made his opinion of her clear during pre-flight the day before. No offense, ma'am, but I trust the avionics sweet more than a gut feeling. That's how we fly now. Elena had only nodded, tightening a strap on her harness. She'd heard that kind of confidence before, right up until the systems failed and the only thing left was instinct. She didn't correct him. She never did. Some things, she'd learned, only teach themselves the hard way, 30,000 feet up, with no room left for pride. The exercise was called Iron Falcon, a routine joint intercept drill scheduled to run 4 hours over the restricted range north of Ash Creek. 2 Raptors would practice detecting and tracking a simulated adversary aircraft, coordinating through secure data link with the ground station manned by Airman Amara Voss, a sharp young radar technician who'd only been at Grey Wolf 8 months. Weather's clean, winds light, ceiling unlimited. Colonel Marcus Reyes briefed the pilots that morning, tapping a laptop screen showing the range map. Simple profile. Bishop, your Vapor 1 lead. Ghost 2 will shadow at a distance for the systems check. Standard procedure, nothing fancy. Bishop grinned at that. Copy, Colonel. Should be a clean one. Elena said nothing, just studied the weather brief a second longer than necessary. Something about the forecast bothered her. Not the winds, but a strange atmospheric distortion reading logged an hour earlier by a weather balloon 40 miles east. Probably nothing. Sensor drift happened. By 0800, both jets were airborne, climbing through scattered cirrus into a flawless blue morning. Bishop flew smooth, confident, chatting easily with Voss over the link about restaurant recommendations in town. Elena flew 2 miles back and high, watching her displays with the quiet attentiveness of someone who'd learned, the hard way, that routine days were the ones that killed you if you stopped paying attention. At 25,000 feet, her radar warning receiver chirped once, a faint, unfamiliar tone, then went silent again. She frowned and said nothing yet. Not until she was sure. Ghost 2, you copy that RWR ping? Elena finally radioed at 27,000 feet. Negative, nothing on my scope, Bishop answered. Might have been a bird strike sensor glitch. Happens all the time on these old airframes. It wasn't a glitch, Elena said evenly. That frequency doesn't match anything in our threat library. On the ground, Amara Voss frowned at her console as a strange shimmer crossed the corner of her radar display. There and gone in half a second. She logged it out of habit, then dismissed it, focused on guiding Bishop's simulated intercept run. Vapor 1, target aircraft bearing 310, 40 miles, closing, she called. Copy, Vapor 1 inbound, Bishop replied, banking his Raptor smoothly onto the new heading. Elena adjusted course to follow at distance, her eyes flicking between her instruments and the empty sky ahead. Something about the shimmer nagged at her, a texture to the static she hadn't heard in 9 years, since a mission file she wasn't allowed to discuss with anyone, including her own commanding officers back then. Colonel Reyes, monitoring from the operations room, glanced at Voss's screen. Anything unusual, Airman? Just some interference, sir. Clear now. Reyes nodded and returned to his coffee, unaware that 40 miles north, an aircraft with no transponder signature and no flight plan had entered the training range's airspace, running systems that hadn't existed in any unclassified threat assessment for almost a decade. Elena's instincts, dulled by 9 years of quiet contract work, began sharpening without her permission. At 29,000 feet, Bishop leveled his Raptor into the simulated intercept, closing on the drone target Voss had vectored him toward. Tally target, 10 miles, radar lock is solid, he reported, satisfaction creeping into his voice. This is almost too easy, Ghost 2. Don't say that, Elena replied. She meant it as dry humor, but her eyes were locked on her radar warning receiver, which had begun cycling through faint, irregular pulses, not threatening yet, just present, like something clearing its throat before speaking. She keyed her mic to the ground station. Grey Wolf Control, Ghost 2, requesting confirmation. Is there any other aircraft authorized in this airspace besides Vapor 1 and myself? A pause. Negative, Ghost 2, Voss answered. Range is clear per this morning's clearance. Copy, Elena said, though something in her chest had gone very still and alert, the way it used to before every mission that mattered. Bishop's voice crackled back, lighter, unbothered. Relax, Ghost 2. Sensors are green across the board. I've got a lock, targets within parameters, everything's textbook. Elena didn't answer immediately. She was scanning the horizon now with her own eyes, not just her instruments, the old habit surfacing unbidden. 30 seconds passed. Then her radar screen flickered, 1 frame, 2 frames, and in that flicker she saw, faint and impossible, a shape that wasn't the drone target at all. Something else was up here with them. Something that didn't want to be found. Bishop, break off the intercept, Elena said, her voice suddenly sharp enough to cut through his confidence. Now, Ghost 2, my lock is clean, I don't see. There's a second contact 11 miles northeast of the drone, low observable profile, and it just went active on a frequency I don't like, Elena said. Break off. That is not a drill. For the first time that morning, Bishop hesitated. He glanced at his own radar, saw nothing unusual, and felt a flicker of irritation at being second-guessed by the contractor everyone joked about at the officers' club. Ghost 2, I appreciate the concern, but my systems are reading clean. I think. His radio cut out mid-sentence. Not static. Silence, complete and sudden, as if someone had reached out and switched off the entire electromagnetic spectrum around his cockpit. Vapor 1, radio check, Elena called. No answer. She tried the ground station. Grey Wolf Control, Ghost 2, radio check. Nothing but a thin, oscillating hiss, rising and falling like breathing. On the ground, Amara Voss watched both aircraft icons on her display freeze in place, their data feeds locked on stale coordinates from 90 seconds earlier. Colonel Reyes, she said, her voice tightening, I've lost telemetry on both aircraft. Complete signal loss. Reyes set down his coffee. Both of them? At the same time? Yes, sir. And it isn't equipment failure. Someone's jamming us. 2 miles above the Ash Creek Range, Elena Kirkwood watched her own instruments begin dying one by one and felt 9 years of quiet retirement fall away in a single breath. The jamming hit full strength 30 seconds later, and it hit like a wall. Bishop's radar screen went black, then filled with meaningless noise. His GPS coordinates froze, then began drifting in slow, impossible circles across a map that no longer matched reality. His radio was dead air except for that same rhythmic hiss, and his data link to Vapor 2 and to Grey Wolf Control simply vanished, as though the systems had never existed. Come on, he muttered, cycling through backup channels with hands that had begun to shake. Without radar, without data link, without a working radio, he was alone in the sky with an aircraft he could no longer trust to tell him the truth about where he was. Worse, somewhere close, invisible now to every sensor he had, flew another jet, his own wingman, and he had no idea where. He banked hard left on instinct, then caught himself mid-turn, a cold spike of fear running through him as he realized he had just turned blind into airspace that might already be occupied. 2 miles away, Elena fought the same darkness, but with a different posture entirely. Her hands were steady on the stick. Her breathing had slowed instead of quickened. She reached instead for something the jamming couldn't touch. The horizon itself, the angle of the sun, the old dead reckoning math she'd learned before GPS existed and never fully unlearned it. She scanned the sky visually, sector by sector, the way she'd been trained decades ago for exactly this kind of moment. And there, catching sunlight off a canopy 2 miles southeast, she found him. Vapor 1, alive, blind, and closing distance on a collision course he couldn't see. Elena keyed her radio on every frequency she still had access to, guard channel included, though she doubted anyone would hear it through the noise. Vapor 1, this is Ghost 2. If you can hear anything at all, level your wings and hold altitude. Do not maneuver. Nothing came back but static. She had perhaps 90 seconds before the geometry of 2 jets flying blind converged into something neither of them would walk away from. 90 seconds to solve a problem with instruments that no longer worked, using nothing but eyes, memory, and a discipline she hadn't needed since a mission file that still didn't officially exist. She rolled her Raptor onto an intercept vector by feel, tracking Bishop's aircraft visually as it wandered through the haze, correcting for the small, panicked drifts of a young pilot flying without any of the tools he'd been trained to depend on. She closed the gap carefully, deliberately, until she was close enough to see his helmet turn, see him notice her for the first time. She waggled her wings hard twice, an old signal from an era before data links, meaning follow me and stay calm. Bishop stared across the gap between the 2 jets, disoriented and frightened, and did the only thing that made sense. He matched her bank angle and held formation, trusting a stranger's wingtip because it was the only steady thing left in his entire sky. Below them, at Grey Wolf Control, Colonel Reyes stood over Amara Voss's dead radar screen, watching 2 blank icons that used to represent his pilots, and felt, for the first time in his career, completely powerless to help them. "Sir, I still have nothing," Voss said, her fingers flying across her console, cycling through every backup frequency the base possessed. Whatever's jamming them isn't standard. It's adaptive, it's hopping faster than our systems can compensate. Reyes exhaled slowly. "Give me Nellis on a landline. I want to know if there's an EW exercise running anywhere near our range that nobody told me about." "Already tried, sir. Nothing scheduled. Nothing authorized." That meant one of 2 things, and Reyes didn't like either of them. Equipment malfunction on a scale he'd never seen, or an unauthorized aircraft running military-grade jamming equipment over a live training range, deliberately, for reasons nobody on the ground could yet explain. "Scramble the alert flight," he said, "and give me everyone who knows anything about that contractor jet's pilot. I want a name, a background check, anything." It took a junior logistics officer 11 minutes to find Elena Kirkwood's contractor file, and another 2 to notice that half of it was redacted. Not missing, redacted, black bars over years of service history that should have been ordinary and clearly weren't. "Colonel," the officer said carefully, "her file says she flew Raptors for 11 years. Then there's a 2-year gap that's completely blacked out. Then retirement." Reyes stared at the screen for a long moment. 2 years, gone from an official record, replaced with nothing but classification markings he didn't have clearance to question. "Give me everything you can on the call sign, Specter," he said quietly. "I have a feeling we're going to need it." In the sky, Elena led Bishop through a slow, careful turn away from the range's rocky terrain, still flying purely on visual reference, still holding her formation steady enough for a frightened young pilot to trust with his life. "Ghost 2, Bishop finally managed over a radio that flickered weakly for just a few seconds. "I can't get anything readable." "No now, no rather, nothing." "I know," Elena answered, her voice level. "Stop trying to fix it. Fly the jet, not the instruments. Match my wing, hold your altitude, and breathe." "Copy," he said, and for once he didn't argue. Below them, the jamming hadn't weakened. If anything, it seemed to be tightening, narrowing its focus as though whoever controlled it had noticed the 2 Raptors were no longer flying erratically and didn't like it. Elena caught a fresh glint of reflected light low on the horizon, southeast, moving with a deliberate, patient course correction that no drone or malfunctioning system would make. Something was tracking them, actively, intelligently. She'd seen that kind of behavior exactly once before, 9 years ago, in a mission she'd never been permitted to fully explain to anyone, an adversary testing a jamming platform against live aircraft, adjusting its interference in real time based on how the pilots reacted. It hadn't been random then. It wasn't random now. "Bishop," she said quietly, "whatever's out here with us isn't a glitch, and it isn't ours. I need you to trust me completely for the next 10 minutes, and not ask why yet." His answer came back thin through the static, but steady enough. "Copy, Ghost 2. Whatever you need." Elena guided them into a slow, descending turn, aiming for a compass heading toward Grey Wolf's runway that she calculated in her head using nothing but sun angle, elapsed time, and 11 years of muscle memory that had never actually left her, no matter how long she'd spent pretending it had. The unidentified aircraft, she still couldn't see it clearly, only glimpses of reflected light and the electronic signature of its presence, held its distance, watching, jamming, patient. Whatever it was, it didn't seem interested in shooting anyone down. It seemed interested in something else entirely, how they would respond. That, more than anything, told her exactly what she was dealing with. "Ghost 2 to any station. This is a live emergency. 2 aircraft experiencing total jamming interference, requesting immediate runway clearance and emergency support." She transmitted on guard frequency, broadcasting blind and static, hoping someone on the ground had found a way to listen. At Grey Wolf, Amara Voss's console flickered once, catching half a garbled transmission through the noise, enough to make out 2 words clearly. "Emergency," and a call sign that made her sit up straight. "Colonel," she said, "I just caught a partial transmission. I think it came from Ghost 2. And sir," she used a call sign. "Specter." Reyes turned sharply. "Say that again." "Specter, sir." That's what she called herself. The redacted file on his desk suddenly felt very heavy in his hands. Whoever Elena Kirkwood really was, she had just announced, unknowingly, over an open emergency channel, the name of someone the Air Force had once needed badly enough to erase from public memory entirely. The alert flight scrambled within 4 minutes. 2 additional F-15s from the adjacent squadron, call signs Talon 1 and Talon 2, racing toward the last known coordinates of Vapor 1 and Ghost 2 under Colonel Reyes's direct order. "I want eyes on that unidentified contact, and I want it identified before it leaves our airspace." Reyes barked into the operations room, already regretting how calm the morning briefing had been. In the air, Talon flight found nothing on radar either. The same adaptive jamming that had blinded Bishop and Elena swallowed their systems within 90 seconds of entering the affected airspace. Grey Wolf Control, Talon Flight, were getting the same interference. The lead pilot reported, frustration edging into his voice. "Whatever this is, it's smart. It's not static, it's reactive. Voss worked frantically at her console, cross-referencing the strange signal pattern against every archived threat library the base possessed, coming up empty every time. Colonel, I've never seen anything like this in any unclassified database. Try the classified ones, Reyes said grimly. It took another 6 minutes and a call to a communications specialist 2 ranks above anyone in the room to find a partial match, an electronic warfare signature last logged 9 years earlier, attached to an operation whose full details required clearance neither Reyes nor Voss possessed. Sir, the specialist said carefully over the phone, that signature's tied to a mission most people don't know actually happened. And there's exactly one pilot on record who ever successfully countered it in the air. Reyes already knew the name before the specialist said it. Kirkwood, he murmured, looking out the window toward the empty runway, waiting for 2 jets that were still somewhere overhead, blind, and depending entirely on a woman his own base had underestimated for 2 years. Back in the sky, Elena held her formation steady as the terrain below shifted from open desert into the familiar ridgeline that marked the approach corridor to Grey Wolf's runway, a landmark she recognized purely by shape and memory, since every instrument in her cockpit remained useless. Ghost 2, I think I see the ridge, Bishop called. His voice was steadier now, some of the panic replaced by focused concentration. Is that our approach? That's it, Elena confirmed. Stay on my wing, throttle back with me, and don't fight the descent. We're going in on visual references only. No autopilot, no ILS, none of it. Copy. Ghost 2, how do you even know how to do this? She almost smiled behind her mask. Old habits. Focus on flying. Below, the unidentified aircraft finally broke off, peeling away toward the northeast and vanishing from even the faint visual contact Elena had maintained, its jamming fading with distance until, one by one, both Raptor's instruments flickered back to life. Radar, radio, GPS, all returning in ragged, uneven bursts. Vapor 1, Ghost 2, Grey Wolf Control, do you copy? Reyes's voice came through at last, tight with relief and something else, anticipation. Copy, Grey Wolf Control, Elena answered, her tone as even as it had been through the entire ordeal. Vapor 1 and Ghost 2 inbound, requesting priority landing. There was a pause on the other end, longer than procedure required. Copy that, Ghost 2, Reyes finally said. Be advised, we'd like a word with you on the ground. About a name you used on guard frequency about 20 minutes ago. Elena's stomach tightened. 9 years of careful anonymity and one emergency transmission had just undone all of it. The 2 Raptors touched down 11 minutes later, tires screeching against sun-baked runway as emergency vehicles lined the taxiway, lights flashing in silent readiness for a crash that, in the end, never came. Bishop taxied in first, hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline had nowhere left to go. He popped his canopy and sat for a moment, staring at the sky he'd just survived, before climbing down onto the tarmac on legs that didn't quite feel like his own. Elena landed second, smooth and unhurried, exactly as she'd flown the entire ordeal. She taxied to her assigned spot, ran through her shut-down checklist without skipping a single item despite everything, and only then popped her canopy to the bright desert sun. Colonel Reyes was already waiting at the base of her ladder, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Behind him stood Amara Voss, wide-eyed, and a communications specialist holding a tablet like it might explode. Ms. Kirkwood, Reyes said carefully, that was quite a flight. Just doing the job, Colonel, Elena replied, pulling off her helmet, gray-streaked dark hair falling loose around a face lined with the particular calm of someone who had done far harder things than this. About that call sign, Reyes said. Specter, where does a contract systems pilot pick up a designation like that? Elena met his eyes without flinching, the old instinct to deflect rising automatically, and then for the first time in 9 years, she let it go. That's a longer conversation, Colonel. One I think you're finally cleared to have. Behind them, Bishop stood frozen, staring at the woman he'd dismissed at pre-flight the day before, suddenly understanding he'd gotten something badly wrong. Inside the operations building, away from listening ears on the tarmac, Reyes laid the redacted personnel file on the table between them. 2 full years blacked out, bordered by an active combat record before and an abrupt, quiet retirement after. "I made some calls while you were in the air," Reyes said. "I couldn't get details, but I got confirmation that a pilot with the call sign Specter ran a classified electronic warfare counteroperation 9 years ago, and that whoever she was, she's the only documented pilot to ever successfully outmaneuver that specific jamming signature without instruments." "That's classified for a reason," Elena said quietly. "It's not modesty. People died getting that information. I'd rather it stayed buried." "Someone brought it back today," Reyes said. "That signature over my range, jamming 2 of my aircraft. That's not a coincidence, and I think you know it." Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking at the folder without touching it. "I think someone wanted to test whether Specter still existed, or whether she'd finally been replaced by someone who couldn't handle it." "And could they?" Reyes asked. "Bishop, I mean, could he have handled alone?" "No," Elena said simply, without cruelty. "Not yet. He flew scared today, and he's got the instincts to do better tomorrow. That's not a flaw, Colonel. That's just where he is." Reyes studied her for a long moment. "I need you to brief my pilots. All of them. Today, if you're willing." Elena looked out the window, toward the runway, toward the sky that had just tried, one more time, to remind her she couldn't stay retired forever. "I'm willing," she said. Word moved through Grey Wolf faster than any official announcement could have managed. By the time Elena walked into the briefing room that afternoon, every seat was filled, pilots, maintainers, even Airman Voss slipping in near the back. Radar logs clutched to her chest like evidence she needed someone to explain to her. Bishop sat in the front row, jaw tight, unable to meet her eyes at first. "Before anyone asks," Elena began, standing at the podium without notes. "Yes, the call sign is mine. Yes, the file is mostly redacted. And no, I'm not going to fill in the blanks today. What I'm going to talk about is what happened in that sky this morning, because every one of you needs to understand it might happen again." She walked them through the jamming signature, sketching its behavior on the whiteboard: adaptive, patient, reactive to pilot response rather than random. She explained why instruments alone couldn't be trusted against it, why visual reference and old-fashioned dead reckoning remained, even now, the only reliable countermeasure. "Lieutenant Callahan did exactly what he was trained to do," she said, glancing at Bishop, who finally looked up. "He trusted his systems. Today, that wasn't enough. That's not on him. That's on all of us for not teaching this anymore." After the briefing broke up, Bishop lingered until the room emptied, then approached her slowly. "Ma'am, yesterday I told you I trusted the avionics more than a gut feeling. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Elena studied him for a moment, seeing not arrogance, but a young pilot genuinely shaken into growth. "Don't apologize," she said. "Just remember it. That's worth more than sorry ever will be." That evening, a secure call came through to Colonel Reyes's office from a name that made his aide visibly straighten. Brigadier General Patricia Olson, attached to a joint electronic warfare command most base personnel had never heard of. "Colonel Reyes," she said without preamble, "I understand you had an incident today involving a signature designated cold static." "Yes, ma'am. Handled without loss of aircraft or personnel." "I am aware. I've also been informed the incident was resolved by a civilian contractor using a call sign that hasn't appeared in any active record in 9 years." A pause. "Is Elena Kirkwood still on your base?" "She is." "Good. Keep her there. I'm sending a team to debrief the incident properly, and I'd like to speak with her directly." "Cold static wasn't supposed to still exist, Colonel. Someone rebuilt it, and the only person who ever beat it is the same person who beat it again today." When Reyes relayed the message, Elena took it with the same unreadable calm she'd shown all day, though something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or the particular weariness of someone realizing a door she'd closed carefully was being pried back open by forces larger than her. "They're not just debriefing an incident," she said quietly to Reyes. "They're trying to figure out if cold static is active again, out in the world, being tested against real pilots." If it is, today wasn't the last time it happens. Reyes absorbed that in silence, then asked the only question that mattered. If they asked you to come back, Miss Kirkwood, would you? Elena looked toward the window, toward the darkening sky. Already did. This morning, whether anyone asked me to or not. General Olson arrived at Grey Wolf 2 days later with a small team and a stack of files thick enough to make Reyes's redacted folder look like a pamphlet. She met Elena privately first in a room with no windows and a door that locked from the inside. 9 years, Kirkwood, Olson said, setting a tablet on the table between them. You went quiet. We let you. It seemed like the right call at the time, considering what that mission cost. It was the right call, Elena said. I wasn't hiding out of fear, General. I was hiding because I was told the fewer people who knew Specter existed, the safer everyone stayed, including me. That held for 9 years, Olson said, turning the tablet to show a satellite image. A remote facility, coordinates blacked out, a silhouette of an aircraft on an apron that matched no design Elena had officially been briefed on. Then 3 weeks ago, this facility went active again. Same jamming architecture as cold static, refined, more adaptive. We've had 2 other unexplained incidents at training ranges in the past month, both dismissed as equipment failure. And today makes 3, Elena said quietly. Today makes 3, Olson agreed. Someone is testing this system against live pilots. Kirkwood, deliberately, methodically, and your base was simply the latest range they picked. We don't know why yet. We don't know who yet. But we know exactly one person who's ever beaten this signature in real conditions. And she just did it again, unarmed, blind, using nothing but visual reference and instinct. Elena felt the old weight settle back onto her shoulders, familiar and unwelcome. You want Specter back. I want to stop whoever's doing this before it costs a pilot, who isn't as lucky as Bishop was today, Olson said. I want you back. Elena sat with the offer for a long moment, the silence in the windowless room stretching until it felt like its own kind of pressure. I'm 47, General. I fly diagnostic checks on refurbished airframes now. I'm not the pilot I was 9 years ago. You flew blind formation with a panicking lieutenant through active jamming 3 days ago and brought both jets home without a scratch, Olson said flatly. I'd say the pilot's still very much intact. And if I say no, then I respect that, and we find another way to shut down whoever's running cold static, slower, and with more risk to the pilots who cross paths with it next. Olson leaned forward. But I don't think you're going to say no, Kirkwood. I think you already made your decision this morning, the second you keyed that radio and said, "This is Specter," without even thinking about it. Some part of you never actually retired. It just went quiet. Elena thought of Bishop's shaking hands on the tarmac, of Amara Voss's wide eyes in the briefing room, of 9 years spent running instrument checks on jets other people got to fly into the sky she still dreamed about. She thought, too, of whoever was out there refining a weapon designed to blind pilots exactly like the one she'd once been, testing on people who had no idea what they were flying into. I have conditions, she said finally. Olson almost smiled. I'd expect nothing less. Lieutenant Callahan comes with me, not as a passenger, as part of the response. He's got the instincts. He just needs someone to teach him what instruments can't. Olson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Done. Bishop received the news the following morning, standing at attention in Reyes's office while Elena explained, in careful, redacted terms, what was actually happening, a threat, a mission, and a request for his participation that was really beneath the formal language, an invitation he hadn't earned yet, but intended to. Why me? He asked, genuinely baffled. 3 days ago, I nearly got us both killed trusting a screen instead of my own eyes. 3 days ago, you learned something most pilots never learn until it's too late, Elena said. That's not a mark against you. That's exactly why I want you there. I need someone who's already felt what it's like when the instruments lie and lived through it. Someone who'll remember. Over the following week, their training intensified beyond anything Grey Wolf's standard syllabus covered. Visual navigation drills with every instrument deliberately disabled, formation flying by hand signal alone, radio discipline under simulated jamming conditions that Elena designed from memory, drawing on lessons she'd never been permitted to teach openly until now. Amara Voss, reassigned temporarily to support the effort, found herself learning an entirely different side of her own job: how to read faint, irregular signal patterns for the specific signature of cold static, building a detection protocol from scratch under Elena's guidance. "You're good at this," Elena told her one evening, reviewing data logs together. "Better than you think." "I just didn't know what to look for before," Voss said. "That's the job," Elena said. "Most people don't. Someone has to teach them." Bishop, watching from across the room, understood for the first time that Elena Kirkwood hadn't spent 9 years hiding out of weakness. She'd spent them waiting, quietly, for exactly the moment the sky demanded her back. 3 weeks into preparation, General Olson's team traced Cold Static's most recent activation to a private testing range in the high desert 200 miles east. Technically civilian registered, legally murky, funded through a shell company that led, after careful investigation, back to a defense contractor with a grudge. Retired engineer Colton Price had helped design the original Cold Static system 9 years earlier, before a security violation ended his clearance and his career in the same afternoon. In the years since, he'd rebuilt a private version of his own system, quietly selling access to it as a training aid to anyone willing to pay, testing it against live military aircraft without authorization to prove it still worked, and to prove, perhaps, that the woman who'd once beaten him hadn't beaten anything at all. "He's not trying to hurt anyone," Olson explained to Elena and Bishop during final briefing. "He's trying to sell a weapon. And the best advertisement he can offer a buyer is footage of a modern F-22 going down because of it. He's using live pilots as a demo reel," Bishop said, disgusted. "Which is why we're going to stop him before he gets the footage he wants," Elena said. The plan was simple in concept, difficult in execution. Lure Cold Static into activating against a controlled flight, trace its exact origin point using Voss's refined detection protocol, and hand the coordinates to a joint task force before Price could realize he'd been the one who got outmaneuvered, this time on purpose. "There's one problem," Voss said quietly. "Cold Static adapts to pilot behavior. If it recognizes Ghost 2's flight pattern from before, it might not activate at all. It might just wait." Elena nodded slowly. "Then we don't fly as Ghost 2. We fly as something it's never seen." 3 days later, 2 Raptors climbed into the pale dawn sky over the Ash Creek Range once more. Bishop in the lead this time. Call sign changed, flight profile deliberately altered to mimic an inexperienced, overconfident pilot, exactly like the one Cold Static had successfully blinded weeks earlier. Elena flew wing, hidden in the data as a simple systems escort, exactly as she had been dismissed as before. On the ground, Voss monitored her detection protocol with fierce concentration, General Olson and Colonel Reyes standing silently behind her, waiting. 40 minutes in, right on schedule, the signature bloomed across her screen. Faint at first, then strengthening, adaptive and reactive exactly as before. "Contact," Voss said sharply. "Cold Static is active. Triangulating now." In the cockpit, Bishop felt his instruments begin to waver, and for one heart-stopping second, old fear rose in his chest before he caught it, remembered his training, and did exactly what Elena had spent 3 weeks teaching him. Leveled his wings, trusted his eyes, and held formation on faith rather than data. "Ghost 2, I've got you." Elena's voice came through clear despite the static, steady as it had been the first time. "You're doing this right, Bishop. Hold it." On the ground, Voss's protocol locked onto a signal origin point with startling precision. "Got it," she said. Coordinates transmitted to the Joint Task Force. "They're moving in now." 40 minutes later, ground teams intercepted Colton Price's testing facility mid-operation, seizing equipment before he could fully realize the aircraft he'd been jamming had never been the vulnerable target he assumed. They'd been bait, flown by the one pilot who'd already beaten his system once, teaching another to do the same. Above the desert, Bishop exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. "Ghost 2, did we just win?" Elena allowed herself, finally, a small smile behind her mask. "We just won." Back on the ground, the debrief was quieter than anyone expected. No triumphant announcements, no medals, just General Olson shaking hands with a small circle of people who understood exactly what had almost gone wrong and exactly how close it had come to going right instead. Price's facility is shut down, Olson told them. Equipment seized, sale contracts under investigation. It'll take time to trace every buyer he was in talks with, but the immediate threat is over. No more live-fire demonstrations against unsuspecting pilots. Colonel Reyes looked at Elena with something that had shifted over 3 weeks from suspicion into genuine respect. You could have said no to any of this, Miss Kirkwood. Stayed retired. Let someone else handle it. There wasn't really a someone else, Elena said simply. There rarely is when it matters most. Amara Voss approached her afterward, radar logs still tucked under her arm out of habit. Ma'am, I want to say, the detection protocol we built, I want to keep developing it. In case anything like cold static ever surfaces again. Good, Elena said. Write it up properly. Get it into the training curriculum. The next Voss who needs it shouldn't have to learn from scratch during an emergency. Bishop found her last, standing near her jet on the tarmac as the sun began sinking toward the ridgeline. Ma'am, 3 weeks ago, I told you I trusted the avionics more than a gut feeling. I don't think I'll ever say that again. Elena studied him. No longer the overconfident lieutenant from that first pre-flight, but someone who'd learned, in the hardest possible way, exactly what instinct was worth. Good, she said, because one day, you'll be the one somebody blind and scared is trusting to bring them home. Make sure you're ready. In the weeks that followed, Elena quietly returned to her contract work, running diagnostic checks on refurbished Raptors exactly as she had before the jamming attack, exactly as if nothing about her life had changed at all. Except now, when she walked across the tarmac at Grey Wolf, pilots who once overlooked her nodded with quiet acknowledgement, and Amara Voss's new detection protocol had already been forwarded to 2 other bases for evaluation. Bishop requested a permanent assignment change, transferring into an emerging electronic warfare countermeasures unit that Olson had authorized in the aftermath of the Price investigation, the first of its kind, built specifically to teach pilots what to do when the instruments they trusted stopped telling the truth. You built something out of almost losing me, he told Elena, the day before his transfer took effect. You built it, she corrected gently. I just handed you the tools I wish someone had handed me 9 years ago. Colonel Reyes, for his part, made one quiet, permanent change to Grey Wolf's training syllabus. Visual navigation and instrument-denied flight drills, taught personally, whenever her schedule allowed, by a contractor most of the base had once dismissed as simply the systems check pilot. Elena never asked for recognition, and mostly she never received it. Not publicly, not in any file that would ever be declassified in her lifetime. But late some evenings, watching young pilots practice formation flying by hand signal under a darkening sky, she felt something settle in her chest that 9 years of quiet retirement had never quite managed to give her. She wasn't hiding anymore. She'd simply found a version of service that didn't need a call sign to matter. 6 months later, Elena stood on the same stretch of tarmac where it had all begun, watching Bishop lead his first solo formation exercise with 2 young lieutenants of his own, teaching them exactly what she'd once taught him. How to fly when the screens go dark, how to trust a steady wingtip over a blinking warning light, how instinct properly earned never really goes out of style. Amara Voss walked up beside her, holding a tablet displaying the detection protocol now officially adopted across 3 Air Force bases. It's got your fingerprints all over it, ma'am, whether the file says so or not. Some things don't need credit to matter, Elena said, watching the jets bank cleanly against the pale morning sky. She thought back to that first radio call, the static, the fear in Bishop's voice, the strange calm that had risen in her own chest the instant the systems failed, not despite 9 years of quiet retirement, but because of everything she'd carried through them, unnoticed, unspoken, waiting. She wasn't Specter anymore, not officially, not in any way the world would ever fully know. She was simply a woman who'd spent a career being underestimated and had learned, over and over, that quiet competence outlasts every loud assumption made against it. If there's one thing worth carrying away from a story like this, it's this. The people who matter most rarely announce themselves. They just show up, steady, when everything else has gone dark, and do the work nobody else knows how to do. If this story moved you, stay close. There are more like it waiting, and more people like Elena whose quiet strength deserves to be remembered. Subscribe, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and I'll see you in the next one.